We support the Real News Network because we want to have independent journalism. And in a democracy, there's nothing more important than the free flow of information. Please join with us and help support the Real News Network.
Thank you for joining us for the next segment of our interview with Howard Zinn. We're talking about the economic crisis, the elections, and U.S. foreign policy. Howard, when Reagan talked about the beacon of freedom on the Hill and the role of America and the rationale for U.S. military might and U.S. military bases being one of freedom and democracy and spreading enlightenment against the evil forces, this is something that is not just a Republican belief. You can scratch a lot of Democrats, and you don't have to scratch very far, that for them it's the embodiment of Kennedy as the one that stood for the beacon of freedom.
Yes.
But it's also very a militaristic vision of how that freedom is achieved. So talk a bit about this idea of this role of America in the world, and can Americans give up on this idea?
I don't think Americans need to give up on the idea of helping to spread the idea of freedom and democracy in the world. I think they have to give up on the idea that this is done by force of arms. And because that idea of connecting freedom and democracy with war and military action goes way back in our history. And our expansion, for continental expansion, overseas expansion, has always been accompanied by noble declarations that we're doing this for liberty and democracy. Here's where the historical education of Americans is at fault, because Americans have not learned, as they should have learned, that the history of the United States is a history of very sordid military actions accompanied by great declarations about freedom and democracy. I mean, when we went into Mexico in 1846 and took half of Mexico, we did it with the idea, we're bringing civilization to the Mexicans. Went into Cuba in 1898 and, we're going to liberate the Cubans. Well, we actually did liberate the Cubans from Spain, but not from us, because then our corporations were there. Went into the Philippines because, as President McKinley said, we're going to bring civilization, Christianity to the Philippines. Woodrow Wilson, who has a reputation of being a liberal, he was a Democrat. Woodrow Wilson talked about spreading our freedom over the world, but Wilson sent a navy to bombard the Mexican coast. He sent an occupation force to Haiti. He sent an occupying army into the Dominican Republic. This has gone on and on, this pretense of bringing freedom and democracy to other places. And all serving the interests of military and economic expansion. And therefore, I think the American people need to begin separating those two ideas, that you can bring freedom and democracy by war. And I think we may have reached that point in world history, at least I hope we have. We've had enough experience with war, lots of experience with war. Our experience with war has been this, that these wars have served no purpose, that in the process we have killed huge numbers of people. And it's time to accept the fact that war, like tuberculosis, like cannibalism, like slavery, is something that should be put into the past.
There's a great deal of the American economy that would have to change.
Yes.
Taking on the industrial military complex and taking that wealth and putting it into domestic infrastructure, civilian infrastructure, is a sea change in terms of U.S. economics.
Yes.
Is that possible?
Not easy, of course, but I think it's possible. I think it's possible, and I think it would be fruitful, because the money that's poured into building up the military is, you might say, wasted money. It goes into destructive things. The money that is poured into the domestic economy builds up people's capacity to live. And it builds up the country. It builds up the physical infrastructure, and it builds up the human infrastructure. So I think it would be actually healthy for the economy. Well, we've seen that our economy, which has been based on war for so long, has not been made healthy as a result.
And that military industrial sector has its ideological political allies. They're in think tanks, they're in both political parties, they're in unions, they're in churches. Then that force is going to get organized for a fight if one goes down this road. So people that want to go down this road had better get ready for a fight.
Yes. Yeah, it will take a tremendous educational effort, but I think education is effective when it coincides with a changing reality which people can perceive. And the American people, for instance, had to be educated on the race question. They did not see what was going on. They did not see black people in the South. They did not see black people in the northern neighborhoods. And they were educated about this by what they saw then about black people rebelling against their condition. So I think the American people are ready to be educated about a very fundamental change in the way we see the world.
Well, a great teacher has shown up on the scene. And that great teacher may be this financial crisis, because reality has just taken a 2x4 and I think swatted all of us in the side of the head.
Yes.
And saying life ain't going on the same way it's gone on, and you better wake up. So maybe we're in one of these periods that are going to force us to have more realistic conversations and amongst more people.
I think you are right. I think the financial crisis and the war crisis combine to create an opening for real change.
Thank you very much. And thank you very much for joining us, and I hope, Howard, you will join us again after the election.
Be glad to.
And if you'd like to see more of these interviews, then we need you to click donate here or donate there, wherever the donate button is. But as you know, we depend on your donations for our existence. Thank you for joining us. Endless wars, abuse of powers, declining living standards, and the climate change crisis. The stakes couldn't be greater in the U.S. 2008 presidential elections. And with your help, we're moving our news operation to Washington, D.C., where we'll focus on money and corruption. For example, big oil and arms companies shape American economic and foreign policy with far-reaching effects on the lives of ordinary people. With allies in government, trade unions, the media, and in think tanks, they're a hidden hand that controls the commanding heights of American politics. Taking on the industrial military complex is what real change requires. Even former presidents and high administration officials have said so. But corporate television news treats such positions as marginal. Well, we think it's the decisive issue in the coming presidential elections. Uncompromising journalism requires questioning assumption, interrogating structures of wealth and power. Corporate TV news just won't do it. Only a news organization that's truly independent can tackle such issues with courage and tenacity. And we'll take on corporate TV news live. You'll watch TV news with our panel of writers, journalists, scientists, and historians. You'll be able to join in by phone, webcam, chat. Together we'll discuss and debate what's the real story and take on the myth and the propaganda. But this is only possible if you support us now. We need to prove that a viewer-funded model works. So if you want the real news, we need you now. Please click on the donate button and give generously. Now's the time to decide if you want the real news to thrive.
Your tax-deductible donation makes it possible. Please contribute at therealnews.com.